Well, it's a lovely day, the 12th of July. If you're marching, I hope you have a good march. If you're at the sea, I hope you have a lovely day on the beach. Because to be fair, and I know we've had mixed weather, this is a lovely day. Certainly, here in Leitrim on a Friday afternoon, it's absolutely gorgeous. I was on the Camino, in Spain 2 months ago now. I began in Tui, not far from the Portuguese border, and I walked towards Santiago. It's not easy to lose weight at my age. I have to try everything. The problem is that I'm a dysfunctional eater. My mother used to love me with apple tarts, and I learned from an early age to express affection by eating large portions of food. As my therapist would say, I eat emotionally. As a young man in Sligo, I'd go to the Trades Club every week to hear Josie McDermott on his flute and various singers and tin whistle players. But then I'd go home to 17 the Mall with me companion, my lady friend, and I'd spend the early hours fumbling around the bed with her like we were trying to find a life raft in a storm. In the morning, after such tempestuous nights, I always felt I should offer her breakfast. It seemed like the appropriate way to confirm my love. And she'd look at the sink full of last night's plates, the dried tomato sauce on the rim of the saucepan, and cigarette butts in the spaghetti bowl, and she'd say, "Why don't we go out for breakfast?" Eventually, I was spending a fortune on food, so we agreed it wasn't working and broke up. That was all before I ended up with a stent, which just might have had something to do with my dysfunctional eating as well. And nowadays, I'm on tablets. My heart beats slower and the juices circulate with less fizz than when I was gallivanting around Sligo in 1975. And so the flesh bills around the heart and the belly wobbles before me as I stand at the mirror. A few years ago, when I was having a checkup, my cardiologist tapped my stomach and joked that I was feeding myself very well. And so ever since that grim comment, I try to walk as much as I can, which is why I went on the Camino for the second time. I know people think that the pilgrimage is about religion, but for me it's not. It's just about walking. I was practicing for a few weeks, up and down the hills of Arigna, and walking around Lough Key Forest Park near Boyle, a place I'm very fond of. The Forest Park has a beautiful visitor centre on the lake shore that serves coffee and fresh croissants. And it's difficult not to walk in the woodland around the lake without being grateful for all the colonial overlords who planted such beautiful trees. Halfway around, I met a couple from Cavan on their bicycles, and being from the same town, we stopped to talk. They remarked that they had heard the cuckoo only an hour earlier as they were donning their headgear. They were strangely excited as they spoke, and I told them that I had heard the cuckoo in the first week of April in Arigna. Sure, Leitrim is a great place for the cuckoo, he said. We don't hear it much in Cavan at all. And why not, I wondered. Maybe you don't have the windows open often enough in springtime. No, he said, it's because the cuckoos don't come to Cavan. Tell me more, I pleaded. By then I'd realised that I was dealing with an amateur ornithologist. He explained to me that the Cavan birds are much too clever to let a cuckoo into the nest, which would explain, he concluded, why they all go to Leitrim. I wasn't entirely amused by the theory, so I didn't pursue the matter further. Well, good luck, he said, and they both got up on their bikes and pedalled away down the avenue that bends under the beautiful trees. I suppose I should have told him about the magpies. I had noticed for some time that magpies in my garden have become disturbingly fat. They eat too much cat food, since the cats are eating mice in the fields at this time of year under the full moon. As I said to my cardiologist, even the magpies are too heavy to fly. So I suppose that's one of the great things about the Camino. I find walking for hours takes my mind off the great anxieties of life in Leitrim, like why cuckoos avoid Cavan, and why magpies are so fat. I walk from morning until mid-afternoon in rain and sunshine. But the problem arises in the evenings, because the food makes me so happy that I eat like a horse. And there's one thing I said in that, which is that I did the Camino not for religious reasons, but just to walk. And you can see that that's true. But some people would say, well, now, Michael, you do have a big appetite for religion as well. So you can't be saying that you didn't do the Camino for religious reasons. You must have, because you're a religious man. And I would say that's true too. But I'd say it's true in this sense. I'm a religious man and I would do the Camino. But when I actually break down what I'm doing in the Camino, I'm not doing anything religious. It's about letting go of religion. It's understanding the Heart Sutra in the Buddhist scriptures. The Heart Sutra that says the ultimate teaching is there is no teaching. Now this is really a beautiful idea. So if I take, first of all, the very basic idea that I have about Buddhism, which is I want to feel enlightenment. I want to experience some kind of bliss and enlightenment. And if I believe that this is possible, if I believe this is achievable, and I believe that it's achievable by following the Buddhist path, then I would say to myself, well, what is the Buddhist path? And the Buddhist path is renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view. Renunciation is to try and be detached from your emotions, your disturbing emotions, your appetites, your desires for things, the things you want, or even the things that you detest, because you can be attached to the things you detest as well. You know, if you have an argument with somebody or somebody you don't like, you can go around thinking about them all day. It's like you're carrying them on your back all day. So we get attached to people in a negative way or in a positive way. And the Buddhist would say that both are like attachments that you need to unburden yourself from them if you want to find bliss. So that's the first thing. And I suppose another bit of that would be the idea that everything you see and you experience in the world as real, the table I'm sitting at and the flowers outside and this moment in time and my own sense of myself. Like, who am I? Well, I'm Michael, and I have this notion that there is a Michael exists. But the more I examine myself, I see that I'm only emotions. I'm only a bundle of emotions, and the emotions change from moment to moment. It's like a fluidity. And the Buddhist scriptures, they say that you should treat all phenomena as like illusion. It's like you're in a dream. You're dreaming the table in front of you. I'm dreaming the flowers outside the window. That the reality around you doesn't have the substantial reality base that you think it has. And the best way to think about it is like it's in a dream. And so you become detached from these things. And the more you become detached from an idea of yourself as something important, an idea of the world around you as something important, the more you experience an awakening, an enlightened mind of bliss. It's like you experience the blue sky when you get rid of all the clouds. You see, all the clouds are there on a cloudy day. But the blue sky is there as well. It's just that you don't see it. And the clouds are like all the detachments and things that you're disturbed about and angry about and emotional about and worried about and longing for, and all your kind of needs and all your attachments. They're all like clouds. And you get rid of the clouds and you have the blue empty sky of bliss, of bliss. And there's your Buddhist idea. So you follow this pathway. One of the ways that pathway goes is through the land of compassion. And that's very simply to say that if you want to let go of your own attachments and your own self-obsession, the easiest way to do it is to focus on somebody else or some other thing. When you're absorbed in another person, you forget about yourself. And so you become naturally detached and you fill naturally with bliss. Because that other person, it could be anybody. It could be somebody you love. It could be somebody you're worried about. It could be somebody you're helping. But that you're focused on somebody else. That compassion dissolves the big substantial idea of an ego. It allows you to dissolve like you would dissolve the clouds and to experience within yourself that big, beautiful blue emptiness that we call enlightenment. So there's the pathway. It's not simple. I know that I've said this before, but I quote the Dalai Lama. A fella asked him one time, what should I do to be a Buddhist? And the Dalai Lama said, get up early in the morning. To get up early in the morning, you need some sort of motivation. And that's how you begin to shape a sense of structure in your mindfulness. That you are living this moment for somebody else. It's as simple as that. I know there's a whole lot of details come into that, like what does living for somebody else mean? It means making them a cup of tea. Maybe it means devoting your life to them. It means forgiving them if they have done something wrong. It means not carrying them emotionally in your head or your heart as something either negative or either something like you're always longing for them. you need them, you're dependent in a way. It's being detached. It doesn't mean not needing somebody it's not a negative thing. It's a way that you can see the possibility to love somebody freely. Now, all those things are like the way of the Buddha. And they're lovely and they're beautiful and they're... To me, at this stage, I'd have to say that Yeshua, that lovely word for Jesus, Yeshua, he is the one who brings me this. You know, in some sense, this wisdom of Buddha is contained within the voice of Jesus, within the stories that he told, within the very things that happened to him. And again, I think that Christianity goes a step further in that it implies to us that in the life, death, resurrection of Jesus, we are experiencing uniquely the transcendent power of God. God as being other than us, fundamentally other, ontologically different. I think that's just a very small difference. There's not a paper between the two, but that's the difference between Christian and Buddhist. It's a difference of emphasis, if you like. The sense of the transcendence of God in Christianity versus the complete immanence of awakened being in Buddhism. But it's a difference that is not a clash. It's not a difference like one is right and one is wrong. It's one emphasis different than another, and you can carry both. And using practices from Buddhism as some sort of scaffolding for Christianity has, in my experience, been very beneficial. But the only thing I want to say about it this afternoon is in relation to this thing about, I go on the Camino and I say, well, you know, I'm only going on the Camino for the walking. And somebody says to me, but that's not true because you're absorbed with religion, so you're going on it for your religious reasons. And I say, well, yes, that's true as well. But it's also true that I'm just walking. How do I square the circle on that? I do it because I feel that in the Heart Sutra, the Buddhist text, there's this beautiful line that the ultimate teaching is that there is no teaching. And for me, that means this beautiful jewel, the Gospels, the teachings of Christ, and the beautiful jewel that is in Tibet, the Lam Rim teachings, the jewels, you know, I find it hard to articulate my enthusiasm for the richness of these things. And I feel that one of the great benefits of my whole life that I feel grateful for is that I have been a recipient of these wisdom teachings. To live in a culture where I can actually absorb the teachings of Christ or the teachings of the Buddha, this makes me grateful. This makes me feel that's the most important thing in my life that I have. Because you could live in a time where you don't hear those teachings. You could live in a time and in a society and a culture where you would never hear those teachings. And to be honest, there's a possibility that we're moving into a time in Western civilization when young people in another few generations will grow up and may not hear the Christian teachings at all, and may not hear the Buddhist teachings, and they won't know the the beautiful complexity of the ideas that are contained within Christian dogma, like the Holy Trinity. What does the Holy Trinity mean? What does God's presence in Christ mean? What does the Word of God mean? What do any of these things mean? It's a possibility somebody will grow up and not know those things. So I feel very grateful that I lived now in this time and was blessed to find the teachers. It's one thing I would say more important than anything is to find a teacher. And if you have somebody, and I mean somebody in real terms, that you go and you meet, somebody who is from some religious tradition, whether it be Buddhist or Christian or some other tradition, but mainstream. I would always say mainstream. Go to the main source and find an appropriate teacher, somebody that suits you, and just share with them conversations about the meaning of life and listen to them, and you will be helped. That's my experience anyway, I have to say. So the teacher is just kind of the most important gateway you'll ever get to a Christian way of life or a Buddhist way of life. And if you have a teacher, be grateful every day. If you don't have a teacher, pray for a teacher. I think you get what you pray for. You may not get it in the way that you imagined. Life always throws up what you want, but not in the way that you wanted it. When you are ready, the teacher will appear. So pray that some teacher will come into your life. And you know what? It will happen. So I have all these teachings and they're fine. But I still come back to that last line. The ultimate teaching is that there is no teaching. So it's like saying that all the sort of dogma of Christianity, all the insights you can have, you can sit in front of an icon and contemplate the icon and meditate and then you read up on what the scriptures say and what theologians say about Christ and then you're just before the icon and all those ideas are in your head and they're enriching the sense of relationship you're having with this sense of a God that is enfolding you. You know, the ever-present love that is in the universe around you. It's in the air around you. It's on the ground you walk on. It's behind your back. It's in the sky above your head. This ever-present love. This love is with you all the time. And the more you contemplate that, the more you become focused within the present moment. People say, be in the present moment. And it's impossible. You're chasing your tail if you keep telling yourself to be in the present moment. Because while you're in the present moment, you're only thinking of being in the present moment. You know? You'd be sitting there meditating and the only thing in your brain is, I'm trying to be in the present moment. I'm trying to be in the present moment. And you might get into a complete rhythm of thinking, I'm trying to be in the present moment, but you're actually not in the present moment. You're still in your head thinking that you're trying to be in the present moment. To actually be in the present moment is a layer of consciousness that transcends language. And the one power that transcends language is always love. You experience love from your lover, your beloved, your children, your parent. When you experience love from anybody, it's like a space beyond where you need to say words. And if you work on the idea that God is not some sort of entity in the universe with a beard looking down at you, but is actually a luminosity and energy that is in every atom of every stick of furniture and every branch of every tree in the garden, if you experience the singular luminosity of the space that you are living in, if you work on the idea, then you will begin to experience within that the presence of love. You will feel the mantle of love around you in everything. And if you start to go in that direction, you will realize you're in the present moment. That's for me the one threshold, It's the one threshold that gets you into the present moment. It's the idea that God is loving me in this present moment, and that his presence is not a separate entity from the cosmos, but is the tingling, the nuclear tingling of the cosmos in all its little electrons and neutrons and protons. This pulsing reality that actually it's not even that it's around me, I am part of it. I'm one with it. And the whole thing is tingling with some sort of love. So I'm enveloped in God's love no matter what's happening. And even if I'm in the dark, even if I'm lonely, even if I'm depressed, even if I'm in difficult circumstances with my health, physically, or with work, or with money, you see, be not afraid. It always comes back, those kind of words from the Old Testament, the Torah, be not afraid. I go before you. Oh, there's something very, very reassuring about religious faith. And I was listening to an interesting conversation recently with two philosophers on YouTube, and one of the little phrases that I took out of it was where one fellow says that the mistake people are making at the moment in the West is that they're trying to find meaning in politics. And he was saying, don't look to politics for meaning, Politics is always about compromise, about just accommodating in the lightest and loosest way possible, accommodating with other people in order to benefit the wider public or the general community. If you're looking to politics for meaning, you end up with the kind of an ideology that your system is right and you should push it down other people's throat. But politics at its best is when it's liberal and when it's kind of democratic, social, open, accepting all sorts of ideas, but accepting them in a conversation that's just like trying to find an agreeable way for everybody to be together. And that's politics. Don't look to politics for meaning. Well, where do we go for meaning if we don't go to politics? And the answer is we go where we used to go. We go to religion. Because religion is the communal, ritualistic expression of meaning. I'm still getting to this point about the ultimate teaching is there is no teaching. And what the ultimate teaching is there is no teaching, what it does for me is every so often when I'm feeling this good, okay, I feel that God is present. I feel that in some sense, it's one of those days where you're in good humour. You feel blessed by God. You feel it's all around you. And those are sometimes the days to let go of religion. In other words, the reality of experiencing the present moment, or the reality of experiencing God, is not an experience that is contained within Christianity or within Buddhism. It is simply the reality. And while religion like Christianity or Buddhism can be a boat to get you there, to get you across the river, when you get there, you let go of the boat. And there's one of the most beautiful things in my experience about religion are those days when you've done the practice, when you've gone to Mass, when you've said the prayers, when you have reflected enough, let's say, on the presence of Christ with an icon or whatever, and you've done it, or you've done enough meditation and guru yoga in a Tibetan Buddhist practice, you've done your prayers. At a certain point, a day comes when you want to have a day off. And those are the most beautiful days. The full immersion in the religious experience comes on the days where you let go religion. Just forget about it. It's also funny, not funny, it's interesting that in many monasteries in the medieval period, the monks would work very furiously at their collective religious prayers, from the office of readings to morning prayer to mid-morning to afternoon to compline in the evenings, and solemn silences and working in the fields and all the rest of it. And they would do that for days and days and days and days, right? Real discipline, real up early in the morning, up in the middle of the night doing their prayer. And then a big feast comes and they don't do anything. They take the day off. You think, well, a feast day they'll be doing more prayers than normal. But sometimes no, they did the opposite. They did less prayers. Because it's like they're floating. They're floating in the energy. There's no need to speak the name of the God who has already possessed your heart. Silence then becomes, as they say, the language of God. Everything else is translation. I remember being on an island, Inish Turk, many years ago, and I was standing outside on a cliff looking at the sea, and the people were inside, and there was a priest had come to the island and he was saying the Mass, and they were all in there muttering away the prayers. It was very beautiful. Myself and this teacher were standing outside leaning over a wall, and I was saying, sure, it's lovely that there's a Mass once every fortnight and blah-de-blah, and she says to me, it is, she says, but sure, you know, out here people don't need a Mass, sure, they have this in front of them. And she looked into the ocean. You know, they're living in God. And sometimes that experience of God's presence allows you to let go of the teaching, because the teaching is like, it's a pathway that gets you to a destination. The destination is the bliss and the joy that you feel just being alive. And that's why when I went on the Camino, I didn't go with an orientation to do anything religious or to do anything in a devout way. I went to enjoy myself. And I did it twice. And I'd walk all day without a religious thought in my head. And in the evening I would have a meal, maybe a couple of glasses of wine. I was so happy. it was in one sense a secular experience. Nothing devotional about it at all. And the other thing is that I was writing a book, and I finished the book yesterday. Now I have a few tiny little changes to make on Sunday, and then on Monday I will send it to my editor in Hachette, and she'll read over it quickly. She'll send it to a copy editor who'll have it for about 10 days, and then the galley proofs will come back to me at the end of this month. I'll sign off on them. It'll take about 4 weeks. It'll be printed somewhere in Britain, and it'll come back at the end of September. It'll be distributed to all the bookshops, and it'll be in the bookshops on the shelf by the 8th of October. The book is called I Loved Him from the Day He Died. And it's about my father, who died in 1976. And in some senses, it's about the Father God, and how the template of one's own father is the template through which this experience of God comes. So that's something that I was doing for the past 6 months, writing about that Camino. And again, I realized it wasn't a book about anything religious on the Camino. It was just a secular reflection of ordinary life. There was just one more thing I needed to say about the Camino, and that is that it's only when it's over that it makes any sense. It's only when I returned from Spain that my week of walking blossomed like a flower unfolding inside me. I flew home from Santiago on a delayed flight, and I drove to Leitrim bleary-eyed and exhausted, which wasn't surprising after all the rain I had endured. It rained for the whole week that I was walking on the Camino. Like, it didn't just rain for an occasional hour. It rained all day and every day. And every night I was kept busy drying vests and socks, and taking insoles out of shoes to dry them on radiators in various hotels. I'd stand at the window and gaze at sheets of rain falling on red-tiled rooftops and wonder how I could have been so foolish as to think this would all be fun. I overnighted in 4 towns through the week, and by Friday I reached Padron, a small industrial area dominated by the chimney of an industrial plant that resembled the masonite factory in Leitrim. And the weather resembled Leitrim in January. Santiago was still 28 kilometres away, and on Saturday morning it was still raining. The trail led through a jungle of forest, woodland pathways, and along the banks of a roaring river with miles of slippery mud underfoot. Early on in the week, my wet gear had proven useless, and each day I got drenched to the skin. On that final morning, I put on the same wet clothes for the last time, as friends texted me from Donegal saying that it was turning out to be a pleasant and lovely day on the beach. And then something changed. In bleak despair, after about 10 kilometres walking, I stopped for a coffee at a wayside restaurant and found myself sitting beside an elderly lady from Ireland. She was mixing white powder from a plastic tub into a bowl of all bran flakes. Then she poured a glass of water on top and began stirring. "What's the white stuff?" I inquired. "Protein powder," she said. "I mix it with water and use it instead of milk." I ordered a coffee and croissant and settled beside her. And from that moment I felt inspired. She was older than me, a good bit older than me, but extremely cheerful. Around us, young people with rucksacks and walking sticks were sharing apples, peeling bananas, munching chocolate bars, and plastering their blistered feet. "Aren't the young ones great?" the old lady declared. "They're walking towards the future they dream of, while we're walking with our dreams behind us." "What age are you?" I wondered. 80, she said. "And why are you walking the Camino?" I asked. "No reason," she said, "but I like the young people. They're lovely." I'm sure she had other reasons for walking, but she wasn't telling me. Instead, we spoke of public transport and driving cars in Dublin and the importance of cats in human flourishing. She was witty and bright and radiated a sense of faith. She seemed happy, as if life had been good to her. Her husband was at home, she said. Her children lived around the world, and she had grandchildren everywhere. Yet she was walking through the muddy forests of Galicia alone, just to feel she was part of a tribe. "That's what young people do for us old folks," she said. "They give us hope." I met her twice more on the road and bumped into her once on the square outside the cathedral in Santiago. A lone figure with her walking stick, her backpack full of all bran and protein powder. "Do you feel better now?" she inquired, "after you completed the walk?" Well, to be perfectly honest, I didn't, no. I had a cold coming on, and the flight back to Dublin was late, and the aircraft felt unusually stuffy, and the ventilation duct above my seat wasn't working. So it was no surprise to me, when I eventually got home, that I tested positive for COVID. Now, I have a suspicion that I got COVID from the lady, because the last time I met her was on the square outside the cathedral in Santiago on that Sunday, and I thought she was a little bit distant from me, not as warm as she had been 2 days earlier when we were meeting along the road. And she said to me, "I have a bit of a cold." And I didn't pass any remarks on that in the moment, except that I didn't go near her physically to give her an embrace. And that's probably, I think, why she said, "I have a bit of a cold." But by the time I got on the plane, 24 hours later, I was really exhausted and not feeling well at all. When I was driving home to Leitrim that night, late at night, coming close to Mullingar, I honestly considered going into the emergency room in the hospital because I thought that the pains I was having in my neck might be a heart attack. That's an anxiety you have if you have a stent put in. You have this little red liquid in a spray that you carry around with you, and you're always wondering if you get an old pain in the chest. I wonder what that is. I was that bad coming home that the moment I got home and I did a test for COVID, sure enough I had it. And I did think now, she might have given it to me. But I wouldn't care if she did, to be honest, because she gave me something much bigger and greater and more beautiful, and that is that wonderful sense of a woman she was 80 years of age. You know, like my friend, I'm 70. And it's just amazing how you can kind of go down on yourself. Do you know, there's some mornings you would wake up and you have a little bit of a disability or a little thing going wrong with your health, and you can kind of get into a self-pity and sort of energy and feel, now I'm fecked, you know, I'm finished. And you can go into that morose space, and it's not a good space to be in. And if there's one thing that keeps me out of it, it's faith, religious faith, prayer. And if there's another thing keeps me out of it, is other people. When I meet somebody like that woman, it lifts me to do more in my own life in a positive way. She's so positive. And she's 80 years of age, her husband's at home. There she is flying out to Santiago on her own and doing the walk the whole way. And of course, on the way, because she's on her own, she's meeting loads of people. And she's meeting mostly young people, because it's mostly young people who are on the Camino. And that's one of the things that gives you hope for the whole of Europe, for the future. You know? They may say what they want in urban areas about how, you know, how we're all changing, how culture is changing. But in a way, culture is always changing, and then it always remains the same. And when I see young people, and it's not that they're devotional in a conventional and old-fashioned way like I would be, but when I see them just enjoying life together and sharing life together and forgiving each other, I'm experiencing the presence of Christ in them. You see, that's how powerful the presence of Christ is. It's a presence that's not just contained within the corral of a few ideas. You know, it's not just that, you know, you learn a few dogmas from Christianity or a few ideas from Buddhism, and then within that you start to experience God. No. They're pathways to the awakening in the present moment that we are all blessed with at some point. But the actual experience of God is much bigger and is much more available, and it's in you, it's around you right now, in this moment, as it is around me right now, in this moment. And I love when I get that kind of energy from somebody, as I say, who's 10 years older than me and is still prepared to go out there and enjoy life. And that's all I want to say. This is just to mark the Camino and mark the fact that I finished the book, and I'm glad to have your presence. So thank you for being here. Bye-bye.